Hey guys, it's your boy, TheJerkDonny here. And this is a debut episode of my new podcast called Arrow in a Botany. Terrible pun, I know. But this podcast is basically going to be us discussing more biological based things. And when I mean we, I mean I have a co-host with me today. This co-host of mine is an amazing chauffeur, and he's also well hung. I present to you my good friend, Sir Nathan Bateman. Bateman, how are you doing today?
I'm very good. I'm really happy to be here. I'm very excited to talk about, things that fuck people up.
So basically what our first episode we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about diseases. And we're going to, of course, do some brief overviews of three main diseases we're focusing on today, which is going to be E. coli, Ebola, and swine flu. And the media perception of that. So Colton, the reason I picked you is because you're actually quite fond of studying diseases. Well, tell us a little bit about your background.
My background, eh? Well, I was really fond of animals, and then I was really fond of conservation. I was kind of all over the place. And then, for some reason, I don't know why, but I started seeing viruses as a really cool... just sort of, we call them entities because a lot of people say they aren't alive, but I don't know, I think they're really interesting, and they're also sort of, I guess you could say they're not really represented that well. Not a lot of people sort of see them as anything more than a virus, but they have this really cool ecology too, where a lot of viruses are actually beneficial to the hosts they infect, so they're just these really cool organisms. And then from there I started looking more into other pathogens or disease-causing organisms. You have disease-causing bacteria and disease-causing parasites, worms. They call them bigger parasites or macroparasites. You can actually see them, but yeah. Oh, also to confirm, I just started with an F-bomb, so is that chill here?
Yeah, that's chill here.
Okay, cool.
Have you seen my other videos? I only drop F-bombs.
Okay.
But you did bring up a really interesting point that I would like to emphasize a bit more, is that there's this big debate when you think of viruses, especially the whole, is it living and is it not? Let's shed a little bit more light on that. So the debate to say that it is living, is it because it has DNA in it? Am I correct?
So people say it's living because it sort of functions like cells a little bit. It's some genetic material that's encompassed by some sort of shell or some sort of skin. And so it can pass on these genes to its offspring. Offspring's sort of a word that we throw out there, but
yeah. So
there's some elements of that that make it living. It acts like sort of a cell would, and it sort of functions like that, and at a microscopic level you kind of see them behaving the same.
Right.
And then people argue that it's not living, though, for some reasons that, if I had to just state my bias here, I actually see them more as living organisms.
Well, I have to agree with you on that fact, too.
So, but people say that because they need a host to reproduce that, and because sometimes in their life cycle they're metabolically inert, so they're just kind of staying there. Some criteria like that, just based on our criteria for life, are ambiguous criteria that they're not living, but at the same time we classify bacteria as living, even though that they can go into moments of shutdown and stasis where they form spores and they don't do anything.
Well, isn't there also just animals that just go into that? Because
yeah,
I believe there is, from my biology classes that I've briefly took, that there's, I don't know if it was a cricket or something. I remember... I was about to drop the professor, but I don't know if you'd appreciate that. But he mentioned there's these crickets that just go to sleep in the sand for years. It can go up to 50 years, and they're just the size of grains of sand. They can just go to sleep for that long and then come back alive, and we consider that animals.
Yeah, and we have water bears they're eukaryotic organisms. They're tiny, tiny animals.
I think that might be the one I was referencing. Yeah,
and they just go inert, and it's so that criteria of life has already been. That's a living organism, but it doesn't fit the criteria. Yeah. And then another thing too, which they say about viruses, is that it requires another animal to live and reproduce, or another cell to live and reproduce. But all of the parasites require that too. So our criteria for life and why we classify viruses as not living, I think, is a little sort of ambiguous. And I feel like you can go either way and argue the point. But I sort of more lean towards the opinion that viruses are living.
Yeah, I also agree with that, but talking about the how ambiguous, of how categorized something as being living or non-living, I do agree that this should be something that should be addressed more as something ambiguous, because I've heard of people coming up with this theory that technically, if you go by the definition of, or the ambiguous information presented of why we classify something as living, technically can't we classify fire as living? I know this is a bit off topic.
No, I agree.
I have to bring this up because it's breathing.
Yeah.
It spreads.
It grows.
It grows.
It reproduces, yeah.
Yeah. So technically, like, don't you think doesn't that show a big problem with the whole classifying thing, like just on the base level?
And at the end of the day, though, too, I've looked into this a lot because I'm very interested on this sort of subject, but like, we classify things as humans, but that's all it is all this stuff. We add this meaning to it of this is a living organism, but what a living organism, we've created that sort of like classification, like everything is just particles at its base levels, and then we sort of assign meaning and value to these particles.
Right.
And some things, when they work together, we call them like living organisms, but again, this is just a human construct that we created. What is a living organism? Well, that's something that humans have defined. And so we're just defining viruses as non-living. We're defining some animals and animals as living. So it's all about definitions. And this has actually been a really huge kind of philosophical debate more than anything with viruses, because so many people are saying, like, okay, well, we're talking about classifying life. Let's just bring up the whole like question of what is life? And then so this whole virus debacle has actually kind of kickstarted that argument again of what is actually life and what is living.
I like these kind of talks because it brings back to like a lot of stuff that, if you guys don't know out there, my friend Bateman here, he's a biologist. He's getting his degree in biology, where I'm getting my degree in psychology right now. And where we both can relate is that, especially in psychology, I don't want to take sides, but a lot of the stuff that I have to study, a lot of people are like, oh, well, this is just based on how you feel and how other people think, which is definitely a problem. But anyways, that's getting a bit off topic, which is fine. Let's start jumping into some of the diseases. Let's start with E. coli. So I've done some research with E. coli. I've actually worked with it in a lab. You've probably worked with it a hell of a lot more than I have. And I guess it was a common misconception, because when I bring it up to my coworkers or friends that I've worked with E. coli, they're like, how? E. coli kills you. Yeah. I guess people don't understand that there's a good E. coli and a bad E. coli. Can you explain that more?
Yeah, so like in media reports and things like that, especially nowadays, when people sort of think E. coli, it's because the media always talks about like food outbreaks of pathogenic E. coli, but the majority of E. coli, we call them strains because they're all the same species, but they're like different kind of like subspecies. But most of the strains are not going to kill you. Like a majority of E. coli is normal, and most of it's actually good for you because there's a lot of E. coli in your gut microbiome that contributes to your overall health. And so, like, E. coli isn't a dangerous thing. There's certain strains, like the most common one, and probably one of the most responsible for a lot of these diseases or these illnesses in people. It's called 0157. That's one of the 0157H7. And that just refers to the strain of it. And so a lot of these food outbreaks happen because of this. So some of the bacteria, some of the E. coli strains, they pick up the ability to produce toxins. So one of them's Shiga toxin. And so when these E. coli strains get that ability to produce toxin, then they become pathogenic. Yeah. And some E. coli too we call opportunistic pathogens. So if you have a healthy balance in your gut, it's not going to really infect you. But if they ever have this opportunity or this window, because maybe you get some imbalance or you've eaten too many fucking peppers lately, and you shoot out all your healthy bacteria.
Shout out to you, Lemon.
If that happens, then like some of these E. coli might take over. But the majority of E. coli is not bad for you or harmful. It's all just sort of portrayed as harmful because that's what sort of gets views. Yeah.
Well, I guess we should mention the biggest one that happened recently, which was the E. coli on the romaine lettuce, when all the romaine lettuce across Canada got pulled. I don't know if it was in the United States. Do you know? I think it might have been Washington.
Well, it kind of went all over the place, and so even people in Canada, even my friends, I was telling, like, you guys should throw romaine lettuce out of your fridge, and so, you know, here are my young friends trying to throw romaine lettuce out of their parents' house's refrigerators, and their parents didn't like that so much, but you know, it can be a serious illness if you're not healthy. And I mean, most illnesses we talk about, most like diseases, you're going to see usually more mortality in people with one, compromised immune systems, two, the elderly, because their immune systems are less able to fight off infection, and three, younger people. Because it's for the same reasons. Their immune systems aren't as developed. So it's pretty serious for them. Mm-hmm. But maybe for a healthy adult, if you get one of these E. coli infections, depending on the strain, your chances of living are pretty good.
Yeah, to further go on to the whole thing about the romaine lettuce, I was quite shocked by that because I don't know if it's just my perception of it. I thought E. coli, because historically every couple of years, or every year it seems like, there's an E. coli outbreak on beef or in pigs or in chicken. I find it's more common in meat, so it's interesting that it actually happened in plants. Is there a difference between E. coli in both, or is it just the same thing? I know it might sound like a dumb question.
No, it's not. So E. coli, it's a bacteria that kind of gets expelled through feces. And then that's kind of like one of the main sources of how it gets transmitted is anything that has contact with feces. So, I don't know, just for an example, say, human poop, whatever. Yeah. We now use biosolids to treat certain soils. Yeah. So what if, E. coli in the biosolids...
If you don't mind me interjecting, what exactly is a biosolid?
Biosolids is a polite term for essentially a soil additive, like a manure, produced from human poop.
Oh, okay.
And so people are experimenting with biosolids now as like a fertilizer and soil additive, and that's actually a huge topic for another day too. But
yeah, I'm definitely gonna put that down. so you're telling me my baby spinach I eat every morning, I have my own shit on it?
No, debatable. So it's very ethically challenged right now because it's of course it's a very socially weird thing, but so I wouldn't say that if something's produced with biosolids right now, I think it has to be very clearly labeled because that's such a socially challenging topic right now that people don't want that. So it's not going to be snuck into your food.
Random question: do you have a pen on you? I'm going to write that down because I definitely want to bring that up later. Look how professional we are, writing in the middle of a podcast. Why do you have the world's fanciest pen? Anyways, continue on with your.
I'm Bateman, bitch. So in some form or another, this bacteria gets expelled from your body, and it finds its way onto like contaminated foods or as a part of agriculture or animals. And so when it gets into your food, if food isn't washed or cooked properly, a lot of sort of these infections come as a foodborne thing. So you find it on the food, you eat it from undercooked or non-properly prepared foods. Yeah, it goes into your body, and then that's kind of one of the cycles of it. But being it's a bacteria, it can be transmitted in many ways.
So basically, to summarize that, the E. coli gets into the soil. So when the plants grow, they get contaminated. So when the cows or pigs or whatever eat it, they get contaminated from that. Yeah. So that's basically the cycle of it, to summarize.
So because it's a bacteria, like essentially, if the bacteria can move somewhere, and if you can get that onto yourself from direct contact, like that's how you're going to get sick. So there's many different cycles, but that's kind of the most common one.
So to get back to the media side of E. coli, because E. coli has always been a big topic when people talk about diseases. Well, how do you feel since you studied diseases, and I know you study a lot of bird diseases, which I will bring up in a bit, don't worry. E. coli, how do you feel the media treats E. coli? Is that something that angers you as a biologist, how they always paint E. coli as like the big killer of all the bacteria and don't ever mention its benefits?
Well, definitely, because I think one of the most surprising things I learned was in my second year of microbiology, when on the first day of class, we learned that less than 1% of bacteria are pathogenic or can kill you. Mm-hmm. Most of them are harmless for you or even good for you. And so the media has this huge obligation to produce high quality news and to tell the whole story and the truth and the big picture. And I feel like that's sort of been strewed lately, and I'm very I hate to say it, but anti-media, because now it just seems that the whole environment is so competitive that all media outlets have to produce anything that will get the most views or whatever,
or just the most shock value.
Exactly. So because it's such a competitive environment now, they can't really go about the truth. They can only go about what's entertaining, and they have to produce on that. So when we talk about E. coli, when I talk about with someone who doesn't know a lot about bacteria, they're like, oh, E. coli, you mean the thing that's going to kill you? And I feel like that's all emerged from the sort of media reports on E. coli. And again, most of it's harmless. And I think that the media, I brought this up a while ago, that the media has such a huge responsibility but no obligation or even legal requirement to actually tell the truth. It's all up to the people to actually believe or not believe what they're saying, and so all of the responsibility actually lies on the people.
Yeah.
But I honestly think that the media sort of deserves a lot more stringency, unfortunately, with the truth. But of course, you can't start tolling the media because then you get into a surveillance state. But
well,
it's just sort of more of a. I would be more comfortable with more of an honor system.
There's one thing I want to bring up. I'll be a devil's advocate in this situation. I do believe the media needs to tone down their portrayal of diseases because they act like everything's like the Black Plague all over again, which we won't bring up in this one. We'll talk about historical diseases another time. But the one thing I wanted to bring up is, as you mentioned, as we keep mentioning, is we learned this later in life. We learned this when we went to university. What about I don't want to sound braggadocious and be like, oh, look at me, I went to university or whatever. But a majority of people don't go. Either they just they're not interested, or they go pursue other things, or even it's just not affordable these days. So, do you think that they should educate in the lower biology programs more about certain diseases? Because I remember when I took biology, all they taught us was human body parts and how the systems work, which I do agree with. But do you think that they should maybe add in educating people this is maybe look into stuff that especially science based,
right?
Look into it more than what the media is portraying it as? Or do you think they should just educate them straight up on E. coli not all E. coli will kill you?
Right. So education's tough because you have to try to teach someone everything in however many years you have in high school, and that's totally fine that people don't go on to more education. It's everyone's choice to do what they want with it. I think the most important thing, because you can't just teach everyone everything about biology, but one of the most important things that people lack nowadays is the ability to think critically. So if they hear something, especially from someone that they believe is a very trusted sort of source in their life, and a lot of that's the media, they sit down in front of it and they listen to it every night, and sometimes they hear these reports and oh wow, this is really entertaining and good. Or
it's all over social media now with the reach.
Oh yeah, definitely social media, but that's what people lack now, is the ability to think critically. So they hear a piece of information, you need to always sort of have some sort of doubt, and even in science too, you always need to be able to doubt yourself. And sort of you want to always test yourself and all this knowledge you get and say is this really true, is this really honest? Same thing with false information, is this really true, is this really honest? And I don't think people really do that anymore. It's just kind of knowledge comes in and they just accept it as the truth, and I think that's a lot of reasons for other problems too, is with, I'll state my opinion right now, but vaccinations, a lot of people...
I was going to bring that up, but let's just get right into the vaccination thing.
A lot of people, are in this anti-vax community. And I feel like a lot of that comes from neighbors and mothers who, live down the street and who they trust and who they're very close with, because now people don't trust their government anymore for various reasons, which I can actually relate to, but... These people come from down the street and they hang out all the time, and maybe they drop in a little low-key thing oh, I heard our neighbor, whoever, their son had an allergic reaction now, and and this whole fucking thing I gotta say about autism, which is entirely false about vaccines.
That's been scientifically proven to be false.
Well, the guy lost his fucking license and all that shit too, but anyway, I think it's all related to trust of... A lot of these people are just hearing this information from someone they trust, and they take it at face value and say, okay, this has to be true because I trust this person. But people don't think critically, and I hate to say it, but no one knows everything, and you always have to kind of keep that in your mind. Is you hear things from people, you hear things from the media, you always have to think is this true what I'm hearing? And we don't have that anymore,
which is a shame. To sidetrack a little bit, let's continue to go down the anti-vax thing, because anti-vax is of course to help prevent these harsh diseases and bacteria from spreading.
We've already touched on so many controversial topics, and I love it.
if anybody wants us to dive in deeper on one of them, we can. This is just of course a face value thing, but if you're talking about diseases, you have to talk about anti-vax, because it's a big controversy right now. Obviously, there's all the memes about it, and if it's memes, it's news. Let's be honest. I'll I'll throw a hardball, controversial question, semi-controversial question.
Yeah.
Do you think there is any merit to anti-vaccination?
Yes, absolutely. So I think one point, I can talk about this for a while, just so you're aware, but
yeah.
I used to work at a hospital, and I would talk with nurses, and I was actually baffled. Probably the most amazing thing I learned working at the hospital and like sort of the whole regional sort of healthcare, what we call it, like zone or region, was that so many nurses were not vaccinating. And like I had to talk to them about the safety of vaccines. And so with every argument, I always approach it from two sides. And I think that's something. That's
how you should approach
exactly.
it.
Like,
and weigh the pros and cons.
The whole playing a role of devil's advocate thing, that's so important today. But anyway, so there's actually, so on the pro-vaccine side, vaccines save lives.
Yeah.
If vaccine side effects were very drastic, they're still less horrible than the diseases, because it's worse to have autism, because I feel like a lot of people who have these slight sort of like if they're on the autism spectrum, for example, there's so many people with autism now that are savants and they're really good at their skills, and if they have sort of a mild degree of autism, that doesn't stop them from functioning or treating it like a disease. But anyway, I feel like something like that is a lot less severe than being fucking dead. And a lot of these diseases that we prevent will kill you, and so there's a lot of arguments on the pro-vaccine side for that, and they are like this sort of these levels of mercury and formaldehyde that are in vaccines. People always talk about that, and it's like if there's more formaldehyde in an apple than a vaccine.
There's also arsenic in your water. So
exactly.
Calm down.
So that's the thing, is the first rule of toxicology is that everything is going to kill you in large enough doses, and vaccines are in small enough doses that they're not going to fucking hurt you, and you have to be there in order to deliver the viral antigens that you need to have that. So there's, on the pro side, you have that vaccines do prevent disease, and some to more extent. Vaccines can be administered, and in Canada we get them for free. And we prevent these diseases that kill us. But then I was always sort of on this whole like clerical pilgrimage, essentially, of vaccines are absolutely 100% good and they have no fucking consequences. And then if you start to listen to anti-vax people, then that's when you can solve the fucking problem, because you can't have two sides just yelling at each other and not listening to each other. So
you have to sit down and have a conversation.
Exactly. So I realized that, and I started talking to these people and these nurses at the place I worked, and I learned a lot. And that's how you solve these problems. So for the things that I know were false, I said, no, this is absolutely not the case. These, the mercury and formaldehyde will not kill you in these vaccines. They will prevent disease. I knew what was false, and I tried to relay that to people. But then you also have to listen, because so many people in the anti-vax communities, they feel like people think they're idiots. But a lot of them might just be uneducated, and some of them are very educated. And so you start to listen to these people, and you start to remove that stigma of all these people are idiots, and they have really legitimate concerns. And you look into those, like, everything has risks to it. Absolutely everything has risks to it. And there are side effects of vaccines. There are these health side effects of certain vaccines. Are they bad enough that everyone should just not get vaccines? I don't think so. But are they bad enough for us to look into the safety concerns of vaccines that people have, and maybe to try to limit those health reactions, as opposed to calling these people morons? I think that's what we should be doing. These things can hurt people. I mean, the chances are, of course, very low. But these side effects do exist, and I'm not going to say that you shouldn't get vaccinated, but you need to talk with your doctor about if your child may, be allergic to vaccines.
Or respond weird to it.
Or respond weird to it. And again, we can study this. We can figure out how to make alternate vaccines that might not have these side effects, as opposed to calling these people idiots when there's actually legitimate cause for concern. And no one knows that too. A lot of people know the benefits of vaccines, and a lot of people are willing to say anti-vaxxers are fucking morons, and some of them are uneducated, of course, and I'm not trying to say they're morons, but some of these people, they don't know sort of the safety of vaccines. But again, you can't just say that they're all idiots, because there's actually some legitimate cause for concern. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't actually know either, is that there are side effects of vaccines for certain people. Of course, the majority of people, everyone should still get vaccines, but certain people can't actually get vaccines because they're allergic to some of the ingredients. Maybe we should be listening to the other sides of the arguments, and maybe we could actually all be safer, as opposed to having measles outbreaks and screaming matches and people dying from preventable illness. It's just, I think it's just got blown out of proportion. Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy now. But
have you heard of the other argument against anti-vax? This is what I heard of. I hear a lot when I hear fellow students talk about some reasons for anti-vax. It gets quickly shot down, which I think there's some merit to it. Maybe is basically a lot of people are not a fan of that some vaccinations and flu shots are they use a part of the disease and insert it into you, or they use a part of the bacteria and insert it into you. Have you heard of those before?
Well, I mean, that's actually how vaccines work. So
I'm just uneducated too.
No. That's that's the one thing is a lot of this stuff is.
That is one argument though I've heard a lot is that people don't.
It's not a bad argument because if I told you tomorrow that I'm going to shove the world's most deadly bacteria or a part of it into your body, you would say no.
Yeah.
But then if I told you I'm going to take, not a bacteria, but a virus. If I told you I'm going to take a virus and I'm going to heat kill it, and then I'm going to put it in your body, there's absolutely no chance that virus is alive. Yeah. It's going to go into your body, and your body's going to have the natural immune response. It's going to create a memory immune defense against it, and then you'll be protected. That's the difference. So
I guess the argument comes down to a lot of trust on the doctors that administer it, and if the disease virus in there is actually completely dead.
Yeah, but I mean they don't make it though. But we have different types of vaccines. We have attenuated and unattenuated. So whether or not the virus has been killed or not.
Yeah.
Or whether or not. So in order to actually have how vaccines work, I'll just start with that. Our body has a natural immune response to things. And vaccines actually work which would be appealing to people, by actually using our body's natural immunity. But it does so in a safe way. So normally if a virus enters our body, we have these white blood cells that recognize this virus, it kills it, and then it also creates these sort of storage immune cells so that the next time that virus enters a body, we have these cells that are already really good at fighting this virus. Yes. And it goes and attacks them immediately. And so how a vaccine works is it uses the part of the virus that our immune white blood cells recognize, and we essentially just put that part inside of our body so that we can create this army of white blood cells that are already really good at fighting that virus. And so sometimes the virus is dead. Most of the time the virus is dead, but there are certain limitations with vaccines that even I don't understand, that we aren't actually able to always use dead viruses. Sometimes you have to use live strains. Yeah. And so, sometimes that's the cause for concern, but we are actually using parts of the virus because that's how vaccines work, is we need to have our body recognize them in order to create an immune defense against them.
So I can kind of see that side of the fear.
But it does sound, absolutely. Like I told you, if I told you I was going to go put flu into your body tomorrow. Yeah. Who the hell would say, I would love flu? Yeah.
No, I wouldn't call sick to work tomorrow.
Yeah, no, but it's if you explain how it works first and then say, this is just a necessary evil. It sounds really scary, but, how many things in life sound really scary but are actually good for us?
Getting a girlfriend, that sounds pretty scary.
Yeah, man. You tell me I'm going to put my dick inside of something. Sorry for all the people on the air. But if you tell me tomorrow that I gotta do that, and then you explain sex to me, God, that would sound horrifying as a child. Yeah. That's the whole thing. A lot of things sound scary, but
it's really not.
At the end of the day, it's all about social perception. And you need to... That's the whole thing with a lot of problems nowadays. It's all about perception. And if you can sort of overcome the problem through understanding people's perceptions of them, I think that's a really good skill. But I think that part of the argument, like you said, that's a problem with people's perceptions. Yeah. They're absolutely right. That's what we do, is we put a piece of a deadly disease inside of them. Yeah. But the way we do it, it's totally different than what they'd expect.
So that was a fun little aside there.
Yeah.
The anti-vaxxer.
So, what are we talking about today? Pizza? Why am I here?
Back to our good old friend E. coli.
Okay.
So, I guess there's not really much to talk about left on E. coli.
I know, it's pretty cool. Pretty neat.
I mean, we've already talked about the good and the bad, the media perception of it, and maybe ways to look around it. Okay. Let's move on to one that's infamous for me, because I don't know about you, but I remember middle school, and I remember swine flu was the biggest deal.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a joke, obviously. It became like, I guess what we call now a meme.
I'm sorry, I'm old. I don't understand your youthful topics.
You're like a day older than me. Shut the fuck up. But the interesting thing about swine flu is, I didn't know of this, but it actually keeps springing up even to this day, even though WHO, which we'll talk about later, because I have some shit to throw at WHO.
Yeah. Fire.
I'm going to spill some tea on them WHO.
Yes, that's the phrase people use.
But swine flu is, I find it's a very interesting disease because, like, everybody's... Basically, the whole perception about swine flu is it was declared by WHO dead in 2011. But even though it has sprung up in very poor nations that do not have the proper medical care, which, again, don't worry, I'll bring that up because I know it's going to be another fun little story.
We're touching on all the important issues right now. This is awesome.
So, just give us a brief overview of swine flu.
So swine flu is a type of influenza, which is influenza is the cause of flu.
Yes.
We just abbreviate it influenza. So swine flu is an influenza that emerges from swine or pigs, and that gets transferred over to human populations. And the problem with it is that our body is used to mainly flus that infect people, and so we have this immune response against this flu that's usually infecting human people, and so we're really used to that type of flu. The issue with swine flu is that when that jumps from a pig to a human, it's fairly unrecognizable by our bodies, and so it takes a long time for us to fight it off, and it could actually have really serious sort of consequences because we don't have a lot of immunity against these types.
What I find interesting about swine flu and flus like it, such as mad cow and bird flu, is that it kind of changes your perception of a lot of like diseases, at least in my opinion, because when I think disease, I think it's spread by like rats. If I think of it spread by animals.
Right.
But I believe diseases are spread number one by birds because they're able to fly the greater distances and cover more people. Is that correct, or am I wrong with that one?
So, I mean, not necessarily. I think it's kind of like, it's hard to define that, but...
Yeah.
So, animals can spread, and animals are a lot of things. So, we have these viruses or bacteria or pathogenic organisms to start, and usually they infect hosts, and sometimes they just go from host to host to host to host. Yeah. But sometimes, I'm just going to put the theoretical sort of situation out there, is what if you're such a good pathogen that you kill off all your hosts? Yeah. What if there's nothing for you to actually kind of live in temporarily until you find another host? And so that's where we call them vectors, which are sort of elements in the environment that transmit disease but don't get infected themselves. Yeah. And so certain like birds, certain animals, they function as vectors. So I mean, in the case of swine flu, this is an actual animal being infected by something, but we have these vectors here. And a lot of viruses and pathogens, they use vectors because it kind of gives them sort of a break between hosts to, live and thrive for a little while, or at least stay dormant until they can find a host. So a lot of animals spread disease, but birds, like you mentioned, because of migration, they actually have a huge influence because they travel such huge distances. Like some birds can migrate from like pole to pole, essentially. So they have this huge sort of contribution to the spread of disease. And I think one of the papers I read recently was talking about Lyme disease and how birds carrying ticks with Lyme disease have sort of influenced the ability, or have sort of caused this sort of distribution of Lyme disease up more north into North America. And so birds do have a huge sort of influence on transmitting disease. I don't know if we can say for sure that they're like the biggest cause, but they are definitely one of, they're a large, I would say a large cause for concern, because I mean waterfowl actually, this is an interesting statistic too I saw too, but some people, waterfowl are really highly monitored because they're such an important like sort of animal for people, for like hunting and things like that. And waterfowl, I think it was something like 93% of them have an avian influenza virus circulating inside of them and infecting them. Jesus. It's not enough to kill them, but you just kind of have this huge cesspool of avian influenza and waterfowl, and it's not killing them, but it's just that I don't even know what to say about it. It's just like acting as this huge source. And
Yeah.
so we monitor.
It's cool, but very disturbing at the
Yeah,
same time.
that's why I like disease ecology, and diseases is it's very cool.
but very
But
fucked up.
nightmarishly disturbing, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's really, but people kind of underestimate these sort of, and I can kind of, if you don't mind, I can go off on a tangent here a little bit, but.
Oh, please do.
Okay, so we call any sort of infection that comes from a animal to a human, we call it a zoonotic illness. It comes from zoo animal, so zoo is like Latin for kind of animal.
Yeah.
So any of these illnesses, these zoonotic diseases jumping to people, these are quite, like I said, serious because we don't really have a lot of immunity against them.
Yeah.
We talk about something else too called emerging infectious diseases, which essentially like what new diseases are popping up that are infectious. So what new bacteria or viruses. And it's over, I think, 61% of those actually come from an animal. So 61% of new diseases popping up come from an animal source.
Well, that's
or
fucking
zoonotic.
scary.
Yeah. And what else I'd like to mention too is we're on the topic of avian influenza or swine flu.
Yeah.
Every pandemic of influenza we have ever recorded is believed and has evidence that it has come from an animal.
Yeah.
So every time influenza is sort of serious enough to cause a pandemic,
Yeah.
that has come from an animal. So that's how serious these sort of animal diseases are, or these animal zoonotic illnesses are. So the biggest killer of all time is an infectious disease. It wasn't actually the Black Plague like people believe.
Yeah.
It was actually in 1918 where we had the Spanish flu,
Yeah.
or the 1918 flu, and that was the biggest like infectious disease killer of all time. And
Yeah.
now I read a paper that sort of a lot of those they kind of looked at the surface markers on this influenza, and they're starting to see that looks like this came from a bird.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting to see that swine flu, avian flu, sort of these really serious flus and these really serious pandemics coming from animals.
To further go on that, as I've mentioned, who declared, I got the date wrong, it was actually 2010, that they declared that swine flu was permanently gone.
Yeah, I never saw that. That's really interesting.
But yet it's sprung up, I don't think I actually mentioned it, but it's killed over 1,000 people in India.
Right.
As recently, I believe it's 2017, 2019,
Yeah.
around that time. It's interesting that they declare something dead, but it keeps popping up. I guess it goes further on to your whole thing about, like, well, if they run out of hosts, it would probably adapt and start adapting and becoming more prominent.
I mean, yeah, definitely. Like,
so when you hear about, like, these diseases that die and then come back, why does the media not, like, because, like, I remember that swine flu back in the day was the biggest fucking deal. And now they don't even bring it up anymore.
Yeah.
I find that interesting. But maybe that'll go into, like, fuck it, I'm going to go on this tangent right now. Do you think it's because it wasn't in the United States? That why it wasn't brought up more?
Jesus, man. Like, I thought we were going to touch on that at the end. But honestly, genuinely, I don't think I think the reason that a lot of these people in Africa and these continents across the world or in the tropics are experiencing all these diseases is because no one in North America or these really rich countries are affected by them, and no one gives a fuck up here because they don't affect them. I think at the end of the day, people are really ignorant about what's going on in other places, and they're really selfish. And we're not researching malaria, we're not researching sort of drugs for these things, and we're not doing anything about these diseases because they're not fucking affecting us. And it's so damn sad to think. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We don't hear about swine flu anymore because it's not affecting us anymore, even though it's affecting other countries. And I'll just jump right into this really quickly as a fact, but Ebola was discovered in the 70s, and it only became a problem when it became a threat to the North American people and to rich countries.
But did you know that it only killed one American and
I know,
4 were infected?
like 11 fucking people.
What kind of pisses me off is I was looking up, because, like, before researching this, you kind of just do, like, a blanket, like, research, like, what are the 10 worst diseases?
Yeah.
And I was looking at this one list on this website, this prominent website. I'm not going to fucking bury them on here. But 8, 9, and 10 were, like, devastating ones in areas like, I don't want to mispronounce it, but it's like Cameroon?
I think
Cameroon and Philippines. Those are definitely areas that are not do not have the greatest medical attention.
Yeah.
And they were talking about like how those affected, and then they mentioned a couple that killed like maybe a couple, they're talking about like how many they infected, and how many they killed.
Yeah.
Number 8, 9, and 10 were like in the hundreds.
Yeah.
And then number like 3, 4, and 5 were like 28 Americans. And
was malaria on that list?
I don't remember. I think malaria might have been at the top because it's got a lot of press now. But what pissed me off is that the one that affected America, with only 28 people getting affected, was put above one that killed hundreds in Cameroon.
I'm not even surprised. Like I said, I think the reason a lot of these really, really horrible killers in the tropics don't have cures yet. Or I can say cures, or at least even treatment. Ebola doesn't even have treatment. Ebola doesn't have a vaccine. It's caused by a virus. But I think a lot of these things just don't affect people in rich countries, where we have money to develop.
Yeah. So they don't give as much as a shit.
Honestly, I feel like that's it.
I'm going to jump into this, since we're on this topic. We'll come back to swine flu and talk about it more, but we might as well continue on this little pace that we're going. So I was reading up about Ebola, obviously.
Yeah.
And they were talking about the controversies with a company I'm not very fond of, the World Health Organization, known as WHO. I've never been fond of them because they're very inconsistent about how they respond to diseases. Now, I get that they do a lot of great, they help provide vaccines and they help the world, but if you are a poor nation, their response time is quite shitty. For example, the Ebola breakout, it took them 2 years to respond and even acknowledge, where England, I believe, UK, whatever, that area, actually stepped in and told the World Health Organization, hey, you gotta fucking do something about this.
Yeah.
Which is quite a somber thing to think about. Why do you think big organizations, of course, the main answer is money, but why do you think big organizations take so long to respond to the poorer nations?
So I never knew about poor response times. So that's something I haven't really looked into.
No.
One thing I can say though, which is kind of interesting, was working at the hospital. We had a response plan for Ebola.
Yeah.
And it was never used. I'm just wondering how much resources went into response plans for these things that were never even important, and that maybe we could have actually been using and setting these resources somewhere else where maybe there are outbreaks currently going on.
Yeah.
Maybe we could have used a little resources there. We could have sent them over to poor countries that maybe needed them more. Who knows?
I'm not trying to. I get the whole business side, and that richer countries get more pull. Playing devil's advocate, I get that.
Yeah.
But we need to protect
our people too. Obviously, a country's first goal is to protect its own people. I get that. But when the Ebola first broke out in, I believe it was West Africa. I might be gotten that completely wrong. Anyway, somewhere in Africa. Right.
It was killing people by the thousands, and they did not respond appropriately. You know what I mean?
Yeah. One other thing we talk about is logistics. When you have a huge organization, a worldwide organization.
Yeah.
Talk about mobilization to get all the shit you need.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to be a guy at the top, or even a guy in a middle sort of level.
Yeah.
Trying to organize with other departments how to get this going, how to get this started. The guy at the top can't organize this all, and the guy in the middle can't organize this all. So you need to somehow find a solution and a meeting and a way to organize everyone.
That's what I find, but that's more getting into political stuff, and we don't really want to touch too much on
not even political. It's just when you have a big company, it's hard to organize that.
No, I get that, but at the same time, I feel like they should have better channels, because I know there's other big organizations that have channels that respond to immediate dangers such as this quite well. But it's funny noting, if you look at the dates for when they responded to Ebola, it was right around the time the first person in America was affected by it.
Yeah, I'm not even surprised. Like I said, we knew about this since 1976.
Yeah.
We found it. It was horrible. People were hemorrhaging out of their fucking eyes. They were bleeding out of their eyes. They were bleeding out of their skulls. They were shitting themselves to death.
Yeah.
When did it become a problem?
Yeah.
Just like you said, it seems like as soon as it became a threat to rich countries.
I'm not trying to sound like I'm anti-America. It's just
because
in this case.
I mean, no other countries did anything about either. Right?
Yeah,
it's not just America. It's
that's true. But just for this one example alone, it's when it like America seemed to be like the thing that binded all this together.
Right.
But I'm not blaming, of course, the United States because I think the problem for me with this is looking at it when you look at stuff like health and science, especially when an organization is the head of it.
Yeah.
That's where I find problems because they don't really look at the they just have like top 5 things that we have to deal with right now.
Mm-hmm.
Any other little thing does not fucking matter. So like if there's like a bunch of people have a rash down in Texas.
Yep.
Or a bunch of people have a rash over in fucking Canada. We have to focus on that, even though there's people dying in other countries.
Well, I'm gonna sort of bring us back to this point, but so Ebola was discovered in 1976. We didn't hear about it.
We're on Ebola, guys. For those somehow keeping along.
So we're on Ebola.
Mm-hmm.
It's discovered.
Yep.
We don't hear about it. Where do we hear all of our information about health and health threats from? You hear it from the media.
Yeah.
Now,
we also hear it from you, but
what's a hot topic? It's anything that affects people or the viewers that the media is listening to. So, if Ebola becomes a threat to the people, we'll say in America, the media is going to report on that.
Exactly.
So, and then as a snowball effect, I hate to say this, but the reason we, at the very head of politics, at the very underlying thing of all governments, all organizations that are related to government, the whole thing, keeping it all together, is that they please the people that they work for, which is the society of their country. And so the media hear that Ebola is a threat, they relate that to the people, and then the people freak out and say Ebola is now a threat. Mm-hmm. And now their governments are obligated, and their organizations are obligated to start researching Ebola and to start reacting. And so I feel like, again, I'm going to relate it back to that I'm not going to blame the governments of countries because they need to keep their people happy and they only have limited resources, but I feel like there's a big role here that as soon as something becomes a threat to a country, the reason we respond is because the media they feed off of that stuff. And so it may be if we hear a new disease happening somewhere else, if we want to be really selfless, we can report on that too. One of the biggest problems I think with infectious diseases right now is we call something where there's these things called neglected tropical diseases, which there are like hundreds of them, that there's all these people in the tropics that have these really weird diseases that we have no goddamn clue of because there's no focus on them, there's no attention on them, because there's no reporting on them, because they're not affecting people in rich countries and the media is not reporting on them. And so like all these crises and all the reasons that we have sort of like these issues, sort of like the Ebola crisis, I think it all emerges from the information we get. And you and I are talking right now about information that, at least a lot of the public information that we got comes from the media. So World Health Organization and swine flu and SARS, CoV, and all that stuff we learned about in the past. Like a lot of these illnesses that we know about, all this stuff comes from the media, and that's actually influencing what we're talking about right now.
Exactly.
So I think that, again, the role of the media is huge here for determining even a fucking global response.
Yeah.
If the media is not reporting on it, the public aren't knowing of it, and the governments aren't doing anything about it because the people that they work for aren't freaking out.
I think that's a good way to put it, because as much as we want to point fingers at people, I know it's really fucking hot in here. I know it's like we want to blame somebody.
Two men and a sauna. That's the new name of our podcast.
But we did get a little heated there. But I don't really want to end it right here. I feel like we should fully flesh out definitions for swine flu and Ebola. So, do you want to fully flesh out swine flu, also known as H1N1, which I completely fucking forgot?
So H1N1 just means we call it a serotype.
I thought you said cereal type. I was like, what?
Well, we can call it that. Cereal type. So it's a type of influenza. It's a strain of influenza that is commonly found in swine.
Yeah, but that was the big one, eh? Back in the day, H1N1?
Well, 2009, swine flu. There's in like the 50s, the 60s, but like a lot of the outbreaks haven't happened for a long time since then. But swine flu was one of the big scares.
I guess we did hit all the influenza. Let's move over to Ebola. Let's fully flesh that out.
Okay. I mean, we know about flu. Flu it happens every winter to us.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can get really serious, but yeah. I mean, these things we're talking about, all these things are deadly. If you have the right sort of environmental cocktail, if you have the right conditions for this thing to kill you, it'll kill you.
Yeah.
Whether it's a compromised immune system where you've been working 15 hours a day and sleeping 4 hours a night, or if you are just elderly and you have a horrible immune system, or if you recently gotten AIDS from fucking your best bud. Like, I don't know. I shouldn't
like we do all the time? No, just kidding.
Bend over.
So we fleshed out Ebola, E. coli, and swine flu. We talked a lot about media. We talked a lot about anti-vax. That's probably going to come up more than once. That got really heated. I loved it. And we talked about who. Don't get me wrong. As much as I don't like the organization as a whole, they do great things. I don't want to understate the great things that they actually do.
Yeah, just like me, they're limited by their size.
No, he's well hung, folks. Just remember that. I want to kind of end this.
Phone number.
I kind of want to end this on a more conspiracy type of question.
Yes.
I feel like when it comes to science, you have to throw out a conspiracy theory. And here's one that I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence about. There is some to back it, and that's basically.
Are you talking about Big Pharma?
It's basically this. I've done a lot of research on social perception, especially when it comes to fear, and how strong fear is for the government to control their people. We've seen that with Hitler. We've seen that with many leaders. Do you think that the overhyping of diseases is one of their strongest tools they use nowadays? And to go a step further, would you believe that governments would purposely distribute diseases to control their people? The last one I feel is a bit far-fetched.
Do I think that government sort of hype diseases?
Yeah, in order to create fear within their people as a ways of control. Because if you think about it, if you're scared of swine flu going to get me, you're not really thinking about Trump being president.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I think, to answer that one, yes and no. I think if I was in charge of a whole country, and I heard that... I'll bring this up. If I was in charge of a whole country, and there's this disease running rampant in it, and people aren't washing their hands, and people aren't giving a damn, because... whatever, if I stay quiet... and people are dying and no one knows about it, then my views are fine. What if people start dying rapidly and everyone cares about it? Or what if I can predict this and people are dying? I want to stress that. Yeah. People need to wash their hands. People need to be careful. People need to prevent this illness because it's serious. I think that governments have the obligation to tell the truth and to do what's best for the nation. So if there's a disease running rampant, yeah, I definitely think that we should be hyping a disease, because I think if something's out there, we need to let people know that we don't fucking joke around with this thing. This will kill you and your kids if you're not careful. Yeah. When something people aren't vaccinating, that's what I tell people. Worst case scenario, if you get a vaccine, your child may suffer a lifelong consequence. It's a very rough thing. Yeah. Worst case scenario, if you don't get a vaccine, your child fucking dies. Yeah. Worst case scenario, and that's the whole thing with... I think we should be hyping diseases if the hype is deserved. So I think that's super important.
Raise this question. I completely agree with what you're saying, because we do have to provide the information to the people. I just feel like, especially when the Ebola thing first happened, that they they overdid it. You know what I mean? They should provide the information, shown how bad it is, but they're there was some I've looked at some news reports. It's Ebola is going to be the death of America and stuff like that. I'm It's a little too far.
I mean, it had potential though too, but like I said earlier too, is we did invest a lot of resources having these like response plans for it. So that's kind of where we were. Maybe we did overhype it. Who knows? I mean, all I know right now is that I'm not dead from Ebola. So maybe what we did worked. And also the other thing you brought up too is like using diseases to control people.
Yeah.
What I learned working in healthcare is that nobody is competent enough to come up with something like this smart. Like honestly, like. If the governments could do that, yeah, maybe they would. Do I think they're doing it right now? I don't think our government's fucking that competent. I don't know anyone that would be able to develop something that could have mind control capabilities.
Yeah.
That, again, I think overall, I don't think there's anyone that we.
Well, I just meant like control. I meant control population.
Oh, as in like euthanasia and disease and shit like that? Cancer?
Killing off people and stuff like
that.
cancer.
Great question. Because the benefit to doing that is that your country has more money, it has more food because there's less people, and it has less problems. Yeah. Do I think a government would do that? Holy shit, that's a huge ethical problem if they are doing that. Yeah. Is it outside of the realm of possibility? Probably not. Yeah. Does anyone though? Would anyone you know in your life, if they had a button in front of you, that said, "I'm going to kill off 70% of this country for the 30%'s benefit"?
I don't know anybody, but there are some fucked up people out there. Right?
True. But again, I think it all comes down to incompetence. I think it all comes down to incompetence.
I think that's something that people should think about, but like they shouldn't die by that. You know what I mean? Like they shouldn't die by that word.
Well, don't ever go all full try hard if you have no evidence to support your claim. Yeah. There's possibility there, sure. There's possibility with a lot of things like that could happen, but again, I don't think anyone's competent enough to be smart enough to develop a plan that's sort of crazy. I think if someone would go through the lengths to do that, if someone was smart enough to be able to finish and make the plan that good, they could be spending that time making a whole other way better plan that doesn't kill everyone. Like I feel like that's the thing. Yeah. It's a really dumb time investment in a if they were that smart, it would be a really dumb way to go about it. Because they'd be smart enough to do something else. I think that's my opinion.
Yeah, I completely understand that. I think this was a very good opening episode. We hit on everything. We hit on some things we didn't even plan to hit on.
Had a little sex break.
Had a little sex break. But yeah, thanks as always for everyone for watching. I want to leave with these closing notes though. So me and my friend Bayman here, we're not scientists. We're just two assholes that just want to talk about some issues that are going on and talk about some interesting things. Maybe put a little information out there for the people who don't know. So, but never ever take what we say as 100% honest. I think the number one takeaway from this is to always double check what we've done because we might actually be wrong about some things.
Yeah, I talk about critical thinking being so important. Yeah, I don't want people to listen to everything I say and be like, yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, make sure you double check what you say and don't believe the government. No, I'm kidding. Make sure you double check and so everything that you everything that's presented to you. And vaccinate your kids. Any closing statements from you, Bateman?
I was very happy to be here. I had a good time.
Anyways, that's the first episode on Botany.
Share it with your friends. Like, share, and subscribe.
Don't you dare fucking say shit like that.
Comment your favorite animal down below. Fucking share this so that I have a job. That'd be awesome.
That would be great.
Anyone looking for master's students? I'm interested.
Yeah, me too, but I'm more psychology. But anyways, next one I think I want to tackle ethics. I think we should go more on the ethics route. So you have that to look forward to. Anyways, take that arrow out of your botany and go eat a plant. See you guys.